brief video on ponderings and the pandemic. I suppose this time I'm maybe going to sound a wee bit like a wuss. I have mentioned in the last few videos about some of the things that sat beside me on my bedside table while I was suffering from coronavirus. We talked about the oximeter, talked about temperature, thermometer, and how that I kept a note of my vital signs. But on the bedside table at the other side of my bed, there was a lamp, a Himalayan salt lamp. And during the sort of worst of my illness, when the nights were long and just getting a wee bit of sleep here and there and waking up with coughing fits and so on, I just kept that light on at the side of the bed, a night light. And that light, I suppose, it brought a measure of comfort in the darkness. It didn't really matter how dark the night got or how hard the night was. That light never altered. That light was always there. And I suppose there's a sense in which that light was a source of comfort, a source of hope, a source of almost warmth in the midst of the cold darkness and the hard experience of life. That light, that room that I was lying in, my bedroom, it never get darker than that lamp allowed. It didn't matter how dark it was outside and how the darkness outside crept its way into the room. The room never get any darker than that light allowed. And I thought about that and just thought about the world that we live in. And we live in a dark world. It's a world that is morally dark, that is spiritually dark. And it just seems to be getting darker as the days go by. Not only a dark world, it's a dangerous world, it's a divided world, it's a world that is almost depressing, a world that is full of prejudices and injustices, a world that is full of death, and a world that is full of destruction and full of division. It doesn't matter where we look. You turn on the news and it's the death rate from coronavirus. If it's not in the UK, it's in Brazil or it's in Mexico or it's in Ecuador, and it just seems to rise and rise and rise. We're living in a world that the very shadow of death has been cast over us, and we're become so conscious of just our own mortality, our own vulnerability, the brevity of our life, and that this unseen enemy, this virus that has spread across the globe, has such devastating effects, such deadly effects on the experiences of men. We're living in a world that is full of war. Yemen and Congo and Libya and Syria, and you look at the images on the television screen and we just see the devastation, the darkness in people's hearts, the darkness in people's eyes as people have lost everything. Many have been maimed, many have been displaced, many are being moved from refugee camp to refugee camp, just living in a real kind of spiritual darkness, living in a dark place. Many Christians are imprisoned for their faith. Many are living under intense persecution in lands like China and North Korea, places like Iran. We think of terrorist attacks against Christians in northern Nigeria with the Fulani tribes people and Boko Haram, and attacks on Christians in Kenya by Al-Shabaab. And wherever we look, there's just this darkness, there's just this division, there's just these injustices and these prejudices that just seem to exist in the world, and all that's been happening in America in recent days, and the effects of that as it's rippled across the world, and just the just the unrest of the varied experiences and circumstances of life. And yet in the midst of all this, there is a light shining. There's a light shining. We read in the Bible about the mission of the Lord Jesus. When he came into this world 2,000 years ago, he came to give light. To give light to whom? To those that sat in darkness and in the shadow of death. That was the moral and spiritual conditions of the people of Israel when Jesus came. He came to give light to those that sat in darkness and those who are under the shadow of death. That's just a description, isn't it, of our present society. The men and women in darkness, spiritual darkness, and under the very shadow of death and destruction. It says about the Lord Jesus in John chapter 1 that he was the light that shone in the darkness. Just like my little table lamp, a Himalayan salt table lamp, it just shone in the darkness. Didn't matter how dark it became, that light was there shining, just offering comfort, offering hope. There in contrast to the darkness that was all around it in the room. And then the Lord Jesus he came to shine as a light in the darkness. And it says that the darkness couldn't extinguish it. The darkness could not extinguish it. Just like the darkness in my bedroom could not extinguish the light of that little table lamp. The darkness in this world cannot extinguish the light of the Lord Jesus Christ. He shines brightly. He did so physically, and he was here 2,000 years ago, living for 33 years in a dark world and shining as a light of hope, as a beacon of comfort, as a beacon of hope in a dark world, in a world that was under the shadow of death. But the tragedy is when Jesus was here, it said that men refused to come to the light because they loved darkness. They loved darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. They were used to the darkness. People just get used. We just get accustomed to the circumstances in which we live. We almost get accustomed to the circumstances that are around us in the world. We become kind of immune to it all. It no longer affects us. There's all these protests about George Floyd and the injustice of his death. And yet the reality is that probably in a few weeks we'll wonder who George Floyd was. The whole thing will pass over. We just become immune to it all. We just get used to it. The darkness. And we almost love the darkness because that's what we're kind of comfortable with, because that's all we've known in our lives. And the Lord Jesus stands in contrast to all that we've known. He's offering us something different. He's offering us hope. He's offering us comfort. He's offering us life. In him was life, and that life, the life of Jesus, was the light of men. And he's offering that life that was in him, eternal life, he offers to you and to me. But we need to turn from our darkness, and we need to come to him. We need to allow him to expose the darkness that's in our hearts. Because light exposes, doesn't it? You go into a darkened room and you switch on the light switch, and all that's in the room is exposed. And when we come to the Lord Jesus, all that's in our heart, all that's in our life, it's exposed. The deeds of darkness, the deeds of sin, the selfish, sinful motives, the unkind thoughts in our mind, the deeds that we do, the attitudes of it's all exposed in the presence of Jesus. He's the light. And the tragedy is that often we just want to hang on to our deeds of darkness. We want to hang on to our sins. We don't want to be exposed. But we need to be exposed in order that we might know his cleansing and know his saving and transforming power in our life. The Lord Jesus says that he was come as that light into the world. And he says, whoso believes in me, the person that believes in me, will not abide, will not remain in darkness. And that's what the Lord is calling upon us. He's calling upon men and women to believe in him, to put their faith in him. He says in John chapter 8, he said, I am the light of the world. He that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. So he's asking us not only to put our faith in him, but he's asking us to follow him. Not just a one-off experience of coming to Jesus in order that he as the light of the world exposes the darkness and the deeds of the darkness in our hearts, and as we confess them he cleanses us and forgives them. But it's not just a one-off, it's putting our faith in him and following him, being his disciple, following the light through them in the midst of the darkness. The darkness of this world, the spiritual and moral darkness of our day. We follow Jesus, the one that is the light of life. And so my challenge as I speak to you today is simply this. Have you believed in the one who's the light of the world? Are you following the light? Are you following Jesus? You know, there's a wee warning in John chapter 12, and it says, while you have light, believe in the light, that you may be the children of light. While you have light, there's a time period. You know, there's a period of time. You know, it's like the timer that you might put on your bedside table, and you know it's only on for a short period of time. And when the time runs out, it just switches itself off, and the light's no longer there. The light no longer shines. While you have light, believe on the light. Can you imagine what this world will be like without the light of Christ, the light of the message of Christ, the light of the gospel? The message of hope and comfort and salvation and life and forgiveness. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a world without Christians? A world where there is no demonstration in the lives of men and women of the love and the kindness and the grace and the forgiveness of God? Because see, Jesus says, not only am I the light of the world, but he says to his disciples, those that believe in him, those that follow him, he says, you're the light of the world. And that is the responsibility of believers in this world, that we have to be a light. Just as Jesus was a light in the darkness of his world, then we have to be a light in the darkness of our world. We have not to allow the world to extinguish us, but we have to shine brightly in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of this world of devastation and death and disease and disappointment and depression and division and prejudices and injustices. As believers in Jesus, we have to shine in the midst of that and shine brightly for Jesus, to offer hope to men and women, to say there is another way. There is hope, there's comfort, there's life, there's real life, there's forgiveness in Jesus. There's another way of living that stands apart from the way that the devastation and the death and the division that's all around us in the world. And so the Lord Jesus says, listen, he says, while you have light, believe in it. Believe in the light. You know, there's coming that day when that light will be taken away. There's coming a day when the Lord Jesus is coming for, not only has he gone away, but he said there's coming a day when I'm going to take my people away. I'm going to take light out of the world. I'm going to take the light out of the world. The Lord Jesus spoke about coming again and receiving unto himself all those that believe in him, snatching them away in a split second, and suddenly the world is plunged into total darkness, where there's no longer the shining of the lights of the Christians here and there. You look up into the sky at night and you see the stars shining here and there, all over the sky. Little sparkles of light. You know, that's like a picture of the Christians in this world, in this dark world here and there, in every country, every nation, and every tribe in the world. There's a little light shining. The life of the believers in the Lord Jesus, those that put their faith in him, those that are following him, and they're shining his lights. And there's coming a day when that light is going to be taken away, and this world will be plunged in darkness. I believe that day is very soon. And I believe that all we're seeing in the world right now is just the foreshadowings of that day of tribulation that the Bible speaks about. 7 years of tribulation, 7 years of darkness in this world when the light has been taken away. When those that believe in Jesus are gone, raptured home to heaven, and this world is plunged into darkness. And this world is plunged into a period of dreadful, dreadful disasters that have never... We're talking today about these being unprecedented days. Friends, I want to tell you what's going to happen in the future when the light is taken, when the Christians are taken home to heaven. I tell you, these will be unprecedented days. when plagues will sweep again throughout the globe, when wars and rumours of wars, when earthquakes, when the very stars will fall from heaven, as this world is plunged under the hand of the judgment of a holy and a righteous God. But right now there's a light shining. And that light is Jesus, and he says, believe in me. And he says, follow me and you shall have the very light